You got to use crutches, you know. All right, Hosea chapter 6. Hosea chapter 6, verse 1. Oh boy, 1 minute. Can we do it? Come and let us return unto the Lord, for he hath torn and he will heal us. Now who are the pronouns referring to? The nation of Israel. He hath smitten. Oh, indeed he's been smiting them. And he will, future, bind us up. Now look at verse 2. After 2 days he will revive us. In the 3rd day he will raise us up and we shall live in his sight. What are the 2 days? Well, the 2 days since the cross is how long? 2,000 years. What's going to be the 3rd 1,000 years? The kingdom, the millennium. You see how beautifully this all fits? All right, now quickly back for a few seconds. And so he calls Lazarus forth. Does Lazarus contribute anything? Nothing. You know, the amazing thing to me is he must have evidently come out of the tomb still wrapped in his grave clothes. Huh? Yeah, and that's amazing. But nevertheless, it's still the picture of Israel. They're one day going to be called back to life nationally. And we're not going to have time for that final miracle. We'll get that next program.
Thank you for watching Through the Bible with Les Feldick, a weekly Bible study. If you would like more information about the Les Feldick Ministries, a Bible study in your area, or about this program, write to Les Feldick Ministries, Route 1, Box 760, Kinta, Oklahoma, 74552. That's Route 1, Box 760, Kinta, Oklahoma, 74552. Through the Bible with Les Feldick is viewer supported, and your gift is appreciated. Thank you, and be sure to tune in next time for Hello and welcome to Through the Bible with Les Feldick. An Oklahoma rancher and farmer, Les Feldick has been teaching homestyle Bible classes for 20 years in Iowa, Oklahoma, and Texas. Les Feldick's unique style of Bible teaching has made the books of the Bible come to life. When Les is teaching, it's so interesting that people say time just seems to fly by. And now, here is Les Feldick.
Okay, and ready to roll again, and we'll just pick right up where we left off after the last program. We're talking about the signs in the Gospel of John. And I'd like to emphasize that there are 8 of them, and they are not just miracles, they are not just wonders, they are signs. And remember, the Jew required a sign, so all of these signs, miraculous though they are directed to the nation of Israel. Now, I've been emphasizing that throughout my teaching of the Gospels, and I know a lot of people are beginning to see it. I can tell it from the response from the television audience that they never realized until they heard me teach it that everything in Christ's earthly ministry was directed primarily, I don't say exclusively, but primarily to the Jew under the covenant promises of the Old Testament. Christ hasn't died yet. They didn't have any idea he was going to die, but they were to believe that he was the Christ coming in fulfillment of those Old Testament covenants. Every Jew that Jesus deals with is still a law-keeping Jew. The temple is still going full blast. I think Josephus, the historian, and many of you have read Josephus' book, up to 1 million animals a year were being sacrificed at the time of Christ's earthly ministry. So that temple was going full speed ahead. And don't you ever forget it. In fact, when we get into the book of Acts, I'm going to prove from the book of Acts that all these believing Jews who were believers that Christ was the Messiah are still law keepers. Nobody has told them to quit going to the temple. No one has told them to stop keeping the law. When you get into Acts 22, when Paul rehearses his own experience up at Damascus, he refers to Ananias a devout man after the what? The law. That's 7 years after Pentecost. And Ananias was a devout believer, but he was still under the law. And Peter, you remember, when he got to the door of Cornelius, he was shaking in his boots, I think, except that God had made it so plain. But just to show where he was with regard to the law, what did he say to Cornelius? Now you know, Cornelius, it's an unlawful thing for me, a Jew, to come unto one of another nation. And when the sheet came down and the Lord said, "Rise, Peter, kill and eat," what was Peter's reaction? "No way, Lord." Why? "I've never eaten anything that wasn't kosher. I've never eaten anything that was unclean." Why hadn't he? He was a law keeper. And so always remember all these things, that as we deal with these signs now in John's Gospel, yes, it's the eternal Creator God that is performing them, but He is pointing them to the nation of Israel to show them their dire need before He could fulfill all those covenant promises. Now then, we saw in John chapter 2, in the last part of our last program, the first of these signs or miracles when He turned the water into wine and filled the water pots to the brim, which was to indicate that when He brings joy to the nation of Israel, it's going to be full. And then when you come down, if you will, in chapter 2, down to verse 11. John 2, verse 11. This beginning of signs, it should be, this beginning of signs did Jesus in Cana of Galilee, and manifested forth His glory, and His disciples, what? Believed in Him. Now even the disciples, what had to really cement their faith? The miracles, to prove that He was who He said He was. All right, now I'm going to skip chapter 3, not because I don't want to deal with the subject matter, but only because we're going to deal with these 8 signs. And now I'll have you come into chapter 4. We come to the second sign, and that is the nobleman's son. And again, I'm not going to take it all the way down verse by verse because we just don't have the time. But beginning at verse 46, Jesus came again into Cana of Galilee, where He made the water wine, and there was a certain nobleman whose son was sick. Now underline that word. He wasn't dead, but he was sick. And when he heard that Jesus was come out of Judea into Galilee, he went unto him and besought him that he would come down, that is, to Capernaum, and heal his son, for he was at the point of death. In other words, he didn't have a lot of time left. Now, where was Israel spiritually at this time? That's where they were. They were sick. They weren't dead. But oh, they were sick. They were in dire straits spiritually. Their religion had been totally watered down, and it had so far departed from the early Mosaic system. And yet they thought they were religious, and they were spiritually sick, nigh unto death. And who alone can restore their national health? The Messiah. And so here's the sign. He comes to verse 48. Then said Jesus unto him, except you see signs and wonders, you will not believe. Verse 49, the nobleman saith unto him, Sir, come down